Can you hear us, Terry?
He's muted.
Yes, I can.
All right.
Morning.
Good evening.
Morning.
There we go. There we go. Beautiful day.
It is nice. It's a little chilly for me.
Yeah.
I keep putting the winter clothes away and getting them back out.
Terry, we had I got a note from Matt Lieber. Are you, you have to leave early as well?
Yeah, we're both speaking at a conference
Okay.
on the Eastern Shore, so we have to get there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Soccer
perfect, yeah.
outside.
And then July, it's so high. Back out.
So true.
You're gonna finish. Matt said he was joining us this morning, I think to start.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Terry, hey, congrats on session wins. That's a big win. Thank you.
Oh,
We didn't
What?
win on the tourism development board side though.
yeah.
What'd you win, Terry?
$1 million. No, just kidding. Our major events fund and the Michael Aaron Bush funds were both fully funded.
Yeah, that's a big.
Wait, which ones were fully funded?
Our major events fund and our youth and amateur sports grant fund were both
Oh,
funded
nice.
fully.
It was under review for cut, so
Wow.
it's a good win.
All right, congratulations.
Thank you.
Not too many wins coming out of there.
Yeah, good for you.
Not too many wins coming out.
Yeah.
Hey, Darren. Just
Good
waiting,
morning.
just giving Matt Lieber a minute, to see if he jumps on. He said he was gonna make the first part of the meeting, so he and Terry have to leave early. So I thought we'd kind of start the conversation there and just give Matt a second.
And we have an Orange Crush Maryland State drink.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, is that what we're gonna do?
They
What's that mean?
made the Orange Crush the official Maryland cocktail. Busy stuff.
At least they-
You're full of good information.
Stuff going through his head.
Can you imagine Bill signing that?
Woo!
Bottle of vodka and the orange juice out of it.
Hey,
Or
Susan,
the orange.
you're on mute.
What's that? Fascinated by
I
that.
could just say I can sleep now knowing that's the cocktail.
Yeah,
I'm more into the
What
state
is-
cake.
Priorities.
Orange Crush. What kind
I-
of drink?
it's vodka and Sprite and orange juice.
Is it even orange juice? I think it's just orange soda.
Or orange, so like
Orange soda.
Fanta or something.
Crush,
No,
orange.
it's supposed to be Sprite with orange juice and triple sec and vodka.
Triple sec.
Okay, all good.
I'm gonna use
Oh,
that.
it's all healthy.
I'm gonna use that piece of.
Terry's ever made one before.
Never heard
I've
of it.
never had one. I don't even know what they are.
Apparently you do.
All right, wow. Let's get the meeting started. I appreciate everybody's time this morning. Hopefully Matt will jump in here pretty quick. So there was two items that we have on the agenda today that we need to get through. One is a review of the report from the interns, which we are actually going to table and do that in the second half of the meeting, because the first half of the meeting, while we have Terry a little bit, is wanted to open up the conversation about the request to the county council. So the timing on this, that everybody's aware, is that by close of business Friday, if not first thing Monday, we've got to transmit the report and a cover letter over to council member Giovando and to Natalie as well. And so we've got to get that over to both of them so that they can then make a request to the GO committee, is it the GO committee?
Yes.
The GO committee. And basically what that request is gonna be is for funding for the task force. The idea was, that we're gonna try and get something built into the budget. And so I want to start the meeting by really kind of figuring out what that request is that we are making. And I basically, just to kind of get the conversation started, and I'll just outline some thoughts here and let everybody start commenting, and then hopefully we'll build up to some kind of consensus going forward. I see an opportunity for us to present three options to the council rather than presenting one. And the three options I was going to throw out to the group for discussion. One would be a request for a feasibility study of an indoor facility, multi-purpose, that can handle graduations, has multiple indoor fields or uses, I'll put it that way. And just do a feasibility study of doing a project like that here in the county. The second option, I would say, would be a larger study going back to what we were originally kind of talking about as a study, which would be to take build on what we've kind of assembled already and take a look at all types of facilities that could be used in the county. And again, looking at it from a regional aspect as well. I don't know, I think what we had originally talked about was like a $200,000 request on that one, I think would probably be it. Ballparking up for discussion. But that would be kind of option two, is to step back and say, no, based on the report, we see that, there's a demand here, but we think that we should be more open than just the indoor type of facility. And then the third option, Terry, this goes to you. The third option would be to make that same request, but to tell the council that we would work on developing a scope to kind of go through the Maryland Stadium Authority research. So we know from previous conversations, Terry, that would take us coming up with the scope, presenting it in the next budget cycle, hopefully getting a win, then assembling a consultant, starting the project. So basically, the rough timeline, Terry, I think kind of from previous conversations you outlined, that would probably result in a report being finished up in 2027 at this point. Is that accurate? I got that about right? Okay. So again, I throw that out there as to say to the request to the council is, rather than saying this is what we want, these are the options that we see as a possibility, and let the council give us direction in regards to that. I'll stop there and throw it out to thoughts and comments.
I think it's a great idea.
Can I, because I missed it,
Yeah,
and I'm
sure.
so sorry.
Yes, no worries.
I only have one thing to say, and it's around, are we in the same line that we need a letter from
Yes.
you guys, signed to me and to Will?
Yes.
It's going to the GOT committee on April 25th. So you can ready to, okay, so that,
So yeah, let me just recap real quick, is so that we were saying that we have a draft of the report, which we're gonna go over in the second half of the meeting. The idea is that I'm gonna put together a cover letter that's gonna go on top of that to have to you guys by close of business Friday, if
Friday.
not first thing Monday.
that's fine.
And then go through that process. I think the date on the GO committee, just so everybody has it, is April 25th.
25th, yes.
Yeah, April 25th is the date of GO committee. So the request and to start the conversation, what I just outlined to the task force was to say, I'm seeing an option where we present you guys with three options. One is to do a study of just a feasibility study of just the indoor facility, which we estimate in the $75,000 range, which again, up for debate and discussion. Second is a more, again, building on this report, is a more comprehensive look of all sports types of facilities here in the county, which would be probably in the $200,000 range. And option three would be to make a request to go through the Maryland Stadium Authority process, which would put us probably into 2027 by the time we're getting the report back. So again, I outlined that as three options, which the idea of the task force not making a demand of the council, but presenting what we see as the options to move forward and let the council give us direction as to which ways that we, they would want to go.
And the survey that you guys worked on with Montgomery College?
That's all in the report.
And,
that's all part of it.
and that will inform what we need. Like,
Well, again, I don't think, and again, the hard thing is I'll get the report to everybody. We're gonna go through it today and then we'll get the report to everybody so everybody can read it. But I don't think the report is a good starting point. And I don't think it's conclusive enough to say this is absolutely what we need. That's why we think it's something that we can build on,
Sounds
right?
good.
And that's where we're at. So again, I'll stop talking and throw it out to everybody for kind of thoughts on that approach and to see if we can get some consensus or we want to change something. I'll leave it there.
I think options is a good idea.
Are those the right options?
Um. 27 is pretty far away,
Yeah.
but, I don't know that we have much of a choice. Unless we decide to take it off the table as an option.
Yeah, if we take it off the table of an option, then we're just going with the indoor facility and saying that's the facility that we're recommending to move forward.
It could be earlier than 27. I think just in looking at all of the scope of things that have been discussed, I just was being super conservative and not trying to give a timeline that was, I don't know, unachievable.
Yeah.
I would see, if everything goes through on the 25th to make a recommendation, the summer could come and then something could be started as early as the fall of 25, which means that the report would probably be 8-10 months from there. So you're talking maybe mid to late 26 versus 27. But I was just being ultra conservative, knowing that there's lots of steps that have to go through to get to, the final approval that the MSA
On
would
the
do.
table then.
Yeah, Terry, hold on, can you clarify that a little bit? Because don't we have to go through next budget cycle, so the funds wouldn't be available until July? We could try and get it in this budget cycle?
Yeah.
There's,
Absolutely.
okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
July 1 starts the new fiscal year, which means that our study dollars and some other things that could be, potentially matched against these efforts, gets replenished July 1. So that's in
Okay.
FY 26.
How do we handle that process of making that request?
Via a letter from the municipality asking for what you want to be done, and the like, and then the MSA's board would review. And then Gary McWigan and Al Tyler and his team would then come back with what they think the cost of that scope of work would be.
Gary worked on the conference center.
Okay,
But when does he have to do that?
Yeah, same thing, Kelly. Yeah,
Gary, or,
same thing with conference center.
yeah, Gary worked on the conference center project with
Right.
us. He's been around. So Terry, is there a match?
The
Is there
ten-
up? Is there up to a certain amount you can fund? And then do we have to match that? Do we have to match it or do you fully fund?
there's 3 ways of going at it. There is the request that you could ask for to be fully funded. If you do that, then that will have to go through a very, a more inclusive process that would then have to get the budget committee in Annapolis to then review and analyze. There is 50-50, which means the municipality puts in 50 and you ask MSA to match it. And then there's a third. And the third is not in play here because we don't have a potential user group that's a part of the process. So that one's off the table. So it's either going to be 100% funded by the county, 50-50 county and MSA, or somehow you're going to convince the budget committee in Annapolis that it needs to be 100% by the state. And that's going to take your state legislators to do that.
so Terry, based on what we've talked about in the meetings and everything else of that nature, is that what's a realistic, I guess, estimate? And Susan, I'm sorry, I'll get to you in a second, but so what's a realistic estimate? Is it in that 200,000 range? Is it 150,000 range based on your knowledge? And
If you're gonna do a market and feasibility followed by potentially market feasibility and then go into design, work, you're gonna probably start with somewhere between probably a $60,000 to $70,000 market and feasibility study to see what the viability of the scope is, and then you're probably gonna add another 75 to 125, depend on what is actually found, then do the architectural studies and engineering to wherever it's identified. So you're somewhere about 175 or greater.
200 in my head.
So if we did, so the reason why I'm asking that is that I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is I think if we're gonna present that as an option, is that we have to give the council, we would be at that point saying we need up to $100,000 for this option
For the match.
for the match.
Yeah. What if we tell them that that we want the state to pay for the whole thing and they say no? Is there like a follow-up?
Less
Can we do
likely.
half? No?
Usually the tricky part is if the state says no, there's probably going to be rationale that's going to just delay it for a very long time.
Oh, no, forget it. Okay, 50-50.
Yeah.
Don't put that.
Mm.
So then it's, and Okay, and thank you for that, Terry. And so then going back to my suggestion is then the one remains, if we want to keep it, would be a feasibility study of 75,000 just to look at the indoor facility. And Terry, I'm quoting that based on what you just said there, that first part of that study is just looking at the feasibility.
Market
part.
and feasibility, yep.
And
And
so.
that will tell you what the county and the city, the county and the state could expect to see from tax proceeds to underwrite bonds in the future and that type of stuff.
That's what we need.
Okay, so that would be for the indoor facility. That's at the whole number on that is 75,000 or can it be
It's
60?
about, it runs in that ballpark usually.
Okay, so that's a whole number on that. And then option 2 would be to do the big study. And that's in the $200,000 range, which
50-50.
we would go with a request to Maryland Stadium Authority for a 50-50 share of that.
What
Do
was the
we-
third?
Well, the second was the county pays for 100%.
Oh, the third
And
option.
then the third option would be to go through the stadium. My question would
Okay.
be, do we still need all three? Or do we combine that into just, these are the two options and kind of go that way? The challenge with us doing two options is that if the stadium authority says no on the match, we're stuck.
I don't want that option.
I think you
The
go with
50-50.
three options. You go with the one where you're looking at the 50-50. I think you also put in the option that the county fully funds the market feasibility through a non-Maryland Stadium Authority company, i.e. like a Fictus or something of that nature. And the third one is, God, I just went blank. Sorry, I had.
It's just that the first study on just the
Yeah.
just the indoors facility. Yeah,
Yep.
just doing that.
Susan has something to say. Susan?
Yes, I'm sorry, Susan.
This is great conversation. Where I was going initially when I raised my hand was, are there milestones? Because I was hearing 2027 and I was thinking that was sort of too far away. And were there milestones we could give decision makers on that path to 2027? And maybe there is, given the way this stadium authority study might parse out and might be able to do before we get to 2027. I think they were expecting something sooner rather than later. And then it's a big job, clearly, given all the conversation we've had. We know that, we understand that. I was just trying to figure out, because I like the sort of the 3 recommendation frame, generally speaking, and then were there milestones where you could point decision makers at that would say, you could accomplish this by this date, you could accomplish this by this date, so that they can see a clearer path forward, not just a study that might be completed in 2027, depending how we figured out a funding structure, right? Whether we pick up the tab or we share it with the state. And then, just as an aside, you'd have to make the rationale for, hiring a different consultant of a type and or going to the stadium authority, right? And if we've had success with the conference center, with the stadium authority, then I would make sure that's part of the argument.
Talking point, Keith.
Yeah.
But my larger point, where are the milestones that they can see a path forward, right?
Under each option, Susan? Under each
Um,
option, give them milestones?
I hadn't thought that deeply. I think that's a really good question. I think however you lay it out, I think they need to see sort of footsteps in front of them and things that can be achieved and feel like they are accomplishing tasks and that there's a roadmap in front of them.
Do we need that much detail in the request? Or do we just need an estimated completion date on the studies? Because are you advocating for get the milestones in the request so that they can make that as part of that decision? Yeah,
I
I'm trying.
think they will feel better about whatever decision they make if they can see, I'm voting on this today and I'm going to have X result by, metaphorically tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Not just something, 2027, a lot of these folks aren't going to be here in 2027. So,
Half of them are gone in 2027.
right.
Half of them are running for county executives. So that's
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah. So you got
So
all
I
that.
have 2 observations, if I might, just to it's a little different and they're pretty tactical, but I think they're more fundamental. The first one is, in the time that we've spent here, it's just reinforced everything that I came in thinking, which is if you don't invest in a serious consultancy that has expertise in this, we're all wasting our time.
Yeah.
So the message has to be to the council, either do it or don't do it. But if you don't invest the money, it's over. Let's not fool anybody. And more importantly, let's not make a terrible decision based on bad or limited information.
Agreed.
Feels to me like that message is fundamental to the whole conversation. The second part to me, which we talked about, and I know it's a big subject to you, Natalie, the idea of the indoor versus outdoor possibility. It's not indoor versus outdoor. It's, are we really zeroed in on a need for a central big space to do big events like graduations? If that's automatically, yes, that is, we need to be more clear because I think we are spinning our wheels on this. Because with regard to sports tourism, you could fundamentally come up with good ideas that didn't take a massive investment of resources, but more of a marketing push. Like, let's use the resources we have to try, different sports or, like cycling, you don't have to build new roads. You just have to get a commitment to do it because you are committed to a sports tourism business model. But you have to understand what a big deal it is to build the thing, if we're going to build the thing. So we're not going to make that decision. So we need in our communication to be blunt about tell us or not tell us, but you can't kick the can down the road. We're wasting our time on that.
So Tom, along those lines, if I could, so the options then that we're laying out is kind of along those lines, is here's the feasibility study on the indoor multi-use facility. We want to do this we can do this feasibility study, or two, we take the bigger look at things, right? The $200,000 look at things. But the third component, which then again gives them the option to make that decision. But what you're saying is, in addition to that, is in the letter, it needs to state
what our
if-
priority is.
yeah, if-
Number one out of the three.
yeah, well, we'll list them in that order, right? Is what
That's a
we
good
see.
idea.
We
Because
list-
it's not a budget question almost at some point. It's do we want this
Investment.
facility for the county as a long-term major commitment of both resources, priorities, et cetera? If that's the case, then we should approach it this way.
Correct.
But that's not a tourism question. That is what's most important for the county in its long-term ability to serve a multiple set of constituencies and needs. And we can't function until we are given more direction of the political and economic impacts. What Matt always says is if you're not sure about what you're trying to do as a tourist, you're guaranteed to fail because you're gonna sort of be all over.
Darren has his.
Yeah, Darren.
Well, I want to sort of endorse what Tom just said and just add a corollary to it, which is given the scope and scale of the investment that's going to be necessary for such a tourism project, if the council is not in support of spending $200,000 on a serious study, now they're not going to be in support of whatever investments are going to be necessary down the road. So this feels a little bit like a test of how serious this whole endeavor is, to Tom's point about this is all going to be a waste of time if we don't put together a serious study. This is similarly, this is all going to be a waste of time if the fundamental support for the endeavor is not there. And I don't think $200,000 is too much to ask as a test of that support.
Gotcha.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
Like put in my hat as somebody who's
Yeah.
gonna get the letter. I do, and I'm with you 100%. I do feel that the decision between the indoor and the outdoor needs to be addressed by you guys. Like based on the things that you're hearing and your expertise,
Mhm.
what do you think is best at this point?
Both.
I have my own opinion, which I'm happy to share. But I have said it here already. I mean, you mentioned, we have beautiful trails. We have so many resources already that we're not, like in terms of marketing or using data to like expose the county and bring people in. We're not doing a great job. That's already happening. Outdoor facilities, right? I've been stuck with an indoor facility that is multi-use for a while, but that's me. But I just need directions to come from you. This is what we think is best. Otherwise, 11 council members have 11 different positions, but you need to be like, this is what we want. And I feel like now I need to step out of this room so you guys have have your conversation.
Yeah.
And but $200,000 is not a lot of money. I think we can do that. We can definitely handle that. So do your thing. We are meeting at 1:30. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So, yes, we are. So along those lines, is there, I understand what you're saying, Kelly, is.
You leave it up to the feasibility study to determine that. I don't know that you have to say it's indoor, it's outdoor, it's one or the other. That's what the feasibility study is gonna tell you.
But another way to look at it is to say, okay, we can do that and take a look at it. But the other thing to look at is to say, well, this indoor multi-use facility, just tell us, is that feasible? Let's take that model and just say, is that feasible? And make that decision.
Why can't we generically say multi-use facility, which covers everything?
Because the way you look
Does
at it,
facility mean indoor?
but the way you look at, I guess you could, and then you get the feasibility study, but again, if you're going to make that kind of multi-million-dollar investment to build a facility, the feasibility study has to take that into account and say, this is, that's a lot of money. You can't just get everything. Would there be other sources? Would there be other sources of revenue? So the sources of revenue with regard to the county, like my MCPS, if that's gonna be $500,000 a year that they're spending on, and that's a fundamental question about whether we build something like that, and you have to tell them ahead of time.
I'm
understand.
afraid of
I
getting
think the
too far
challenge
into
that you
weeds.
have is that if you make the scope too big and too dynamic, one, your study is going to get astronomical.
Yeah.
Because now they're looking at an indoor facility and an outdoor facility, then they got to figure how, if they two are separate, that's going to be analyzed two separate ways. And then if you merge the two, then they're going to be measured again about how, if they were coexisting, and the like. And then they're going to say, oh, and if you also kept them as not coexisting, but they were indoor here and outdoor there, you're almost looking at 4 studies.
Terry, along those lines of the $200,000 that we were talking about before, with kind of a study of kind of what do we need again, that back to that basis. Are you saying that study, it wouldn't make them individually? That study would come back with a conclusion of saying this is what is needed, whether it's indoor, outdoor, whatever, it would pick it and say.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So the larger scale would be about assessing the entire environment as to what is missing in the environment.
That's one we want.
Yeah.
That's one we want.
To follow up on your point, Kel, I think that what I'm trying to say is you just have to be clear on the political priorities of it. You can tell the consultant, say, hey, we would like to be doing this, but you got to tell them, is this a tourism specific study? If they are given, this with the golf course, if you look at it as sports tourism, some of the big facility may never come back as anything viable. Because you're never going to make enough money, man, necessarily compared to the cost in. But if it's got all these other elements that are non-sports tourism, it just need to be clear on that. Hey, we want it for other reasons, and it may have some economic benefit beyond that as well. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes,
Darren?
great.
Yeah, what I was gonna say may have just been said, but to Terry's point, it was gonna be a question for Terry, and I think maybe you kind of answered it, but I think what we're asking about on the one hand is, are we asking for a market feasibility study that asks the question, what might be feasible from an economic standpoint of an effective tourist generating thing, versus is an indoor multi-sport facility feasible? And it seems to me a much more, the narrower question, the latter question, would be probably cheaper to get a consultant to answer and maybe delivered with more clarity. Yes, no, could be if you did this. Whereas the first question, what might be economically feasible, they're going to start by peppering us with questions like, well, what sports are you talking about? What do you mean? What does feasible mean? And it's a smushier question.
Yes.
And the budget for answering it could be, sort of enormous. So I guess, I would sort of lean toward, the more narrow question. But I will also say, Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez just said this is she wants to hear from you, from us, what we think. And we can certainly say what we think. I actually think it is a political question. What the appetite of the council is going to be to back the thing. And I heard in that hearing that we were all at, a lot of enthusiasm for the high school graduation, maybe track and field, that kind of thing. And ultimately, if we think that's where the political energy is, then maybe that's the question we should be asking.
So Darren, along those lines, that's why I'm kind of thinking that what we need to do is present the two options. And I think what Natalie is saying is she's asking for us for what is our priority. But ultimately, to everybody's point, and it's been said a couple of times here, the elected officials have to make the decision. They got to tell us, this is what we're willing to invest. This is what we're willing to look at. And, if we present those two options, that, Darren, just like you said, that's option one, is that, hey, we think an indoor multi-use facility, it could be used for graduations and others, multiple sports and stuff. That's that feasibility study for, 75,000, or a share going after a $200,000 study that we go after a share with Maryland Stadium Authority, and just that big look. The question would be, are we clear? Darren, I just heard you say your recommendation would be the smaller study being the priority and putting that first from the task force recommendation. Or does the task force want to make a recommendation of the other study with the smaller study as the backup, the second one? What order do we want to present that in?
I sort of feel like you sent us the language to remind us of our task, so I sort of feel like we got to be responsive to their first and foremost request. I agree that I think after all our conversations that a larger study in really deeply investigating sports tourism and what that means makes a lot of sense to me, as a resident of the county and whatever. I think part of it is deciding we want that in our community, as Tom was saying, and what we need to do to leverage the assets we already have today to make that a reality. But I clearly think there are other things we need in order to accomplish that goal. But I think first and foremost, a lot of council members think that we don't have an arena. We ought to have an arena. An arena could do two things in their heads, two things. Be walled off for 2 weeks to drive 27 graduations through it, 26 high schools and Montgomery College. And then the rest of the year, drive private revenue through there. And it could be sports events, it could be concerts, it could be whatever. And I think they want to know whether that's doable or not doable.
That's option one. So we're I kind of posed the question, we're back to these two, and we're just trying to figure out from a task force, we kind of have to make the recommendation and it seems like we're in agreement on these two options. But what Natalie said is she's looking for us to make direction of this one is the one that we think is the priority. This is secondary.
The priority is the 200,000.
Money's
Yeah,
always the
talked about,
priority.
Talking points and the pitch. There's a good pitch. There's jobs generated from this. There's tax dollars generated from this. Like there's imported dollars from outside of the county. I mean, there's some really good other talking points to pitch with this, other than just give us the money to do the study. And you don't want to go too far into the weeds, but it's also about economic development and vision.
Yeah.
That's you.
So it's not about
That's all
today.
you, Kelly.
That's,
I mean, I told Keith after the last meeting, I'm very passionate about this. I've been here way too long. I've been in the state my entire life. I'm very passionate about this. And it is a missed opportunity. We're already probably 10 years behind. And so this is the window and this is the time, and if we're passionate about the pitch, we're gonna get it done. So I can retire.
I can retire. I love
Not before me.
it. There you go. We're all in the race.
I just did jump right in, the water's.
I'm losing, I'm losing.
The one thing I would say to what Natalie sort of her message to us as she left is you guys gotta tell us.
Yes.
And one of
That's
the
right.
things that I
We
think
should.
the last 6 months have identified is without the study, it's not really a very appropriate question, to be honest.
Correct.
Like we just we got a bunch of college kids doing a survey. I mean, I did this, Terry's done it. These things are big, complicated. You know, we pay a lot of money for a reason. And we couldn't do any of it. Let's not assume we've got all these answers. The point of the study is to literally make a good
I agree with
economic
you.
decision. You gotta commit, you gotta bet on the come.
Yeah.
So the question that I again brought up was only we need to ask, we need to be
Yeah.
clear and ask. But just tell us what the political reality is, because you don't want to go into this. At the last meeting, at some point in the game, we were going down a road of outdoor is more likely to have more opportunities. It's much more flexible. It's more accessible. And then a little bit out of nowhere, it's, yeah, but you gotta be thinking about this other thing.
Graduation.
Don't tell, we're wasting our money if we give to a consultant and then we didn't tell them ahead what that reality was. That's all I'm saying. The bigger one is much better to do. That's what I would say. But it
That's gonna be
feels to
the
me like if the immediate issue, which is what Darren said he heard and we all heard, that underlying is they don't want to say it, but it really is this thing that's maybe it's more gettable. That's our conversation at right now. What are we doing responding to their question to us? Let's not fool ourselves. We don't have great answers that they might want to say, oh, we could do this great economic, impetus and it'll be a great, it'll fill your vision, Kelly. We don't have the answers and we should not act like we do. That's why you pay money for a good study.
So Tom, if we were to take that approach and say, we really need, look, there's something here, we don't know what it is. You could answer this question in one of two ways, the broad version, indoor, outdoor, unanswered. The point would be to answer it. Or the narrow version, up and down on indoor. How would we, Natalie said, you guys tell us what to do. Instead of telling us what to do, we're going to come back to clarify the question. What information do we think we would be able to provide the council to inform their judgment on that question?
But
Like
Matt,
the pros and cons of A and the pros and cons of B. Because if we could do that, I could get behind asking the question.
Well, I
Right.
think the fact that Matt Liver is completely maxed out and can take no more business at his facility is one reason.
I would just say as the analyst that would naturally have to present this objectively.
Yep.
I think the big question that I would pose for them to sort of evaluate is, how does this compare to the economic impacts of other investments that we can make, which we regularly don't do, right? I mean, the whole econ committee is going to review all kinds of enhancements to economic development budgets, which may or may not get passed. I mean, is $2 million for incubators more effective than whatever the investment is for you're starting with the study? It's hard to say. I mean, I think I know that why we talk about the impacts here, we know what it is. We have the youth sports, it's very popular. But this study is not going to tell us exactly what that economic output is compared to other industries that are here. And frankly, if they did that, it probably wouldn't be ranked very high, right? So I think the case here can't be purely economic because it's going to lose. We don't do enough economic development anyway. And to suggest that this would be the most cost-effective or efficient way to grow our economy is kind of like probably not the case. Unless maybe I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong. But I'm just saying it's part of, I think that's why the community aspect is really relevant, because it gives them something else to hang their, analysis or evaluation on.
Well, I think, and to take that one step further, I think you're right. I said, everybody's heard that and even in the language, it says community activities as far as graduations and stuff is a key part of what they're looking at. In the meetings that there was that sentiment was expressed as well. So you know, we can go in there and make a recommendation, and we think it's a bigger study that may or may not result in what you're looking for in a community impact. But then, like Bilal is saying, they're gonna have to wrestle with that against other money that they're spending for economic development. Which unless we can, to Darren's point, get behind data, which we don't have right now to make a real argument, in that regards. So if we give them the opportunity and we give them the choice, we can say, we think this bigger study is done, but we're giving you the choice, you can do the feasibility study. Tom, you're getting back to your point is, they're gonna take a vote on that. You know, and they're gonna say, we can get behind this or we can get behind that. That gives us our direction.
Bilal, can you walk us through that? So on April 24th, what happens? Remind me,
On the 25th,
or the 25th, yeah, remind me, is it Geo and Econ?
no, it's just GEO because they're the ones who review Office of the County Council, which is what this is a study for us to do. Yeah, if the chair agrees to hear from you, I think she probably will. Yeah, she'll just let you probably present your options. And she'll ask you to describe the pros and cons of the potential, economic development outcomes that you think are, and then also, one, it's a standard question we've been asking is what happens if we don't fund this? What are the alternatives? What are the negative consequences if we don't? So, you want to maybe address it like that. It's going to be interesting. I mean, the official process is that we're putting everything on a reconciliation list if it's approved out of committee. So I'm not, today's the first day of the committee work session, so I don't know if it's gonna be one of those things where everything gets on reconciliation, they do that at the end, or if they're gonna be a little more discerning during committee, it's hard to say. And I don't know how to predict what happens to this request once it gets on the list, right? So, but that's why I do think you're gonna want several pillars of arguments supporting it, because if it's just the one thing, then I can tell you, we have a lot of economic development things. I don't know that this should be
Yeah,
competing
I mean,
against those.
don't we all agree one of the reasons we're here, it's economic development plus, it's community use, it's branding for the county, it's quality of life. It's
Good word.
it's leadership in the county on things about, we know several county council members would like us to have a professional sports franchise here. That's not an economic winner, but it's still an important thing because for a variety of reasons, including if it were a women's professional rugby team, because people want to be a leader in something. So I think we don't need to focus on if it's not an economic gangbuster win, it's a loser. That's not the way these things work. It has to be economically feasible and smart, and all these other elements are part of the bigger package of its attractiveness.
Right.
That's what we're trying to do. But we can't answer all that. The real question is, after you get the study, then that's what I've been involved is when the study's there, then you go in front and you're talking about bonds, you're talking about relative priorities. We don't have to make all the decisions. What we need to make is, are we in a reasonable place for something that most people would think is a good thing to have happen? And the answer is yes, for jobs and this and that. We want to say it is appropriate for the Montgomery County to have a better and more sophisticated sports tourism capability. That is what we as a county should be. But we can't make that economic investment into that without knowing more. That's what we're asking for. We're not asking to do it. We're asking for the ability to create a very strong justification for doing it.
Yeah.
That's the asking to go.
I concur. I do have to run, however.
Okay.
But I do concur with what Tom just said.
Thanks, Terry.
Thanks, Terry.
See you,
Appreciate it.
Derek.
Yeah, thank you. Bye now.
So we're okay, but this seems like we're back to where this all started in the original committee and then deciding to make the decision to make the task force. It's like almost like we got to go back to all those discussion points and the reason why they made this resolution to take the task force. You created this task force,
Here's our recommendation.
but our recommendation is we need money to do a study so we can make
What
the
we asked
formal
for.
recommendations.
And to that point, Terry, Matt, and I
Yeah,
can stand up
Yeah.
with absolute certainty and say, The way not to do this
Yeah.
is well established, and counties and cities have done
Yeah.
it, and private developers across the country. They get enamored with this or whatever, and they go invest and they can raise it. It's not about raising the money, it's spending a program. And they do it wrong because they didn't do the upfront work. Happens all the time. And our task force at this point for the first 6 months can easily say, our biggest finding is the need to be not too fast and a lot of smart about using limited resources to take the second and third steps.
So Keith opens with talking points and then the questions will allow, is that how it works? I forget.
Well, you have to pitch the proposal.
Right, and then they ask questions.
Yeah. So keep it tight. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of things.
Yeah.
And it's sort of an extraneous request technically.
I think it's important to talk about who's in the room, Keith, when you tee up.
Yeah, I'm gonna be floating a lot of ideas
Yeah.
between the task force. So that's kind of, to me, is almost phase two of this, right? Is the kind of, I want to make sure that we're all in alignment and what I'm gonna make as my statement and so on and so forth. But I've also, as step one, I've got to make the written request on top of the report, right? I've got to make the written request, which just basically outlines it. Doesn't need to be all my talking points, but it needs to be the quick written request to say, you know, again, I keep going back to those two options and saying, these are the two options, this is what we're saying, this is what we're recommending, and that's the written request. Right? I mean, that's all it needs to be, is that pretty simple written request, and we get there, and then we'll do the talking points, and like you said, the sales pitch. You know,
Okay.
And then, is that?
Yep.
Make sense?
Yep.
So then I go back to recommendation is taking kind of some of your words there is to say is, you know, look, the biggest thing we found is you can't move fast. You got to do this right and not make the mistakes that have been made over and over again. And we think, as a task force, we think that there should be a bigger study, which is what we were charged with, was a bigger study and looking at sports tourism in Montgomery County. And it's $100,000 request with provided we can get a match of $100,000 Maryland Stadium Authority. Option B would to be an indoor facility, a more limited feasibility study on an indoor facility that would handle graduations, multiple sports and things of that nature. And that's it. At that point, Tom, I think we've laid it back out to the council. And they get to make the decision. They can tell us, as much as we're sitting here saying, we think the big study should be done, the council at that point can, or the committee at that point could make the recommendation and say, no, this is what we want, guys, and take a look at
The
that.
only thing I would add, Keith, is that we, even at this point, take the opportunity to vision it out and say, we believe it could be great. And it would look like this, and it would have all the things Kelly was saying, you know, the talking points of what success looks like. And then juxtaposition that against, but you can only get there. We can't tell you that this is guaranteed, but this is what it looks like. This is what success would look like, where we have full use and it would be economically feasible. And it would be a beacon on the hill for the county, and that people would be proud of it. And we get community use out of it. And they would build other economic benefits from development. All those things about a visioning about what sports tourism can be in its best light. And it can bring health and quality of life to a broad, and we can then develop from this physical place all kinds of programming and outreach that we didn't even know about. That's the vision for the
There's your
thing.
speech.
And then you say, but without doing the work, you're never going to get there. So we can't tell you what it actually is now, but don't waste your money by not investing a little bit up front. And they have that much higher, the whole pitch at this point is the higher probability of success is to make the investment now here.
Yes.
Good people on this committee too.
So
look.
for the record, do we need to include some of that in the written request? I mean, do we need to?
No, I don't.
You know, does that, because that written request is, if it comes out of committee, that written request is what's shared with the other council members. So they're not gonna hear the sales, they're not gonna hear the presentation at the GO committee. They're not gonna hear that presentation. They're only gonna get the written report that we handed in. Is that correct? The full council, if it goes to full council.
Yeah, if it goes to full council, it'll be a presentation of what are the committee votes on. So that it'll be the chair saying, we agreed if they said, yeah, we put it on the reconciliation list, and then other council members are debating it at that point, they may call you up and you may have a chance to present at full council, but it's gonna be based on what what the committee decides.
But if,
They'll
but
have,
if
it's a
not, like,
public document, so they can
yes,
see it.
but that's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
But if not, then the council members could be reviewing what came out of a GO committee and reviewing the written.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is,
Okay.
there needs to be some of this included in the written.
Yeah,
We're
definitely.
talking- I would,
Okay. That's what I'm
bullets,
talking
bullets.
I would also say, I think it's worthwhile pointing out what happens if a study doesn't get funded. What is the future of this task force? I think you may want to explain that.
Yeah, well,
That's an important, like, what is left to do then?
Yeah, if the study isn't done, then the task force dissolves.
Kind of, yeah.
I don't think
That's
anybody.
like an important.
Yeah.
These are our recommendations.
Okay.
Gonna take our ball home.
I think it's a very reasonable thing to say, because if you're not gonna fund
Yeah,
$100,000 study, you're not gonna fund a
right.
Yeah.
major tourism facility.
It's a tonal message, because you don't want to act like you're wasting my time personally. Like,
Well,
it's not valuable, but it is an important message. to say. Because I think to the point of you establish the task force,
Oh, yeah.
and the task force in and of itself has developed several key takeaways. One, the vision of success is real. We've looked around at a lot of things and it would be great. And two, it's going to take certain things to get there. And three, if we don't comfortable with that there, we probably should be honest and without threatening, just sort of stating it. And the work that we have now, we've come to this point exactly where we should be. And now they give us a decision and we proceed accordingly.
Could I,
Yes.
one more thing? I wonder, the thing that's on top of a lot of decision makers' mind is the impact of all the federal issues flowing downhill, if you will. And is there an argument to be made somewhere in there that if the county is going to pivot, we're a highly dependent federal town, I've learned not as highly dependent
Not
as
very
another jurisdiction in Maryland that I didn't fully appreciate, but we're still fairly dependent, right? And, again, I'm here because Montgomery College needs a place to graduate, but I've been a parent, as we talked about, and I've been on the Eastern Shore where they roll out the red carpet when your sports tournament comes to town, right? Every hotel has got a signboard that says, welcome, there's they make every ball field available, right? From the really crummy little elementary baseball field to the Shorebird Stadium, right? And they roll out the red carpet. So is this a tool to help pivot for the future of Montgomery County, right?
I like that, Susan. You know what I would call that? Diversifying your economy.
Yep. Now, that also
I agree
says,
with the
we just
federal
heard, this
piece.
isn't really on some level, you can't really do the economic analysis and make that case, but I think that might resonate with some,
Yes.
right, on a broader level. Are we going to be the place that leverages the assets and takes advantage of this moment in time to think about another path to make Montgomery County a thriving place, right? And thriving is a big word and it could be measured multiple ways, because these are assets that residents could use as well as tourists, right? And I think as a decision maker, they're going to want to know I'm taking care of the residents that are here today, right? And who are worried about where my kid's going to graduate from, as well as where can my kid play ball. I mean, I happened to be in the hearing the other night where the Little League organization was testifying about how much Little League has grown in Montgomery County and how hard it is to find a ballpark for their tournaments and activities, right? And you might even reference some, you've heard this stuff at hearings, so.
To that end, I do think, because that's one of the reasons I'm sitting here is the community use thing is super important.
Yeah.
Matt and Terry have a different opinion, that it dilutes
For
a little
this purpose, we
focus.
do.
I can promise you that what you just said, and because I testified 2 days ago, I got 3 calls from people about fields after I testified in front of the public use, the public testimony for the budget about fields. The idea that we could make this investment and that a smart investment would add to community use capability is a political winner.
Yeah,
Even though Matt and Terry drives me crazy, because you can get diverted and get off back, but it is a
True.
political winner, and we should mention it.
And I agree.
And it's beyond that, it's also exactly the way sports tourism should be investing. It's too many times they've invested for the money and not thought about the community.
Community.
And then it's left vacant and fallow half the
Yeah.
time, and people get angry and it's not as good use. So it happens to have the benefit of being true in addition to being politically valuable.
Well, and I recently visited with the head of the Only Boys and Girls Club in that whole complex over there, and they are a perfect model of that. They use it community-based in this, and then they sell it for
Yes.
this, and they're balancing it all. And that's what they're doing. And, you know,
That is the way, even the
Yeah.
biggest, fanciest facilities are doing
Yeah.
that. too.
I will say it's funny how much testimony we get about, I don't support the property tax increase, but please fully fund the parks budget.
Yeah.
That's because Darren is so effective at
Yeah.
community engagement.
Because we're getting slashed.
Hey, just look at the latest county survey. Whoever spoke to that in the hearing, I just looked at that survey. They're right on.
Pretty powerful.
They're popular. We all love our parks. It's one of the reasons we all live here. It's a top seller.
Yeah.
Good job, Darren.
How's it done? Okay.
No, are we?
Sports Tourism Task Force meeting?
Oh,
Sorry.
no worries. Good to see everyone.
Nice to see
Looking
you.
forward to debrief soon.
We will.
Okay. So I think we've got the framework. Are we all in agreement?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I will have something assembled, but I got a lot of notes here and I'll start incorporating. I'm gonna start circling this around quickly because we've got to get some of the written
Don't wait and then
testimony.
start formatting.
Yes, and she probably early Monday.
Fair enough. I was gonna say, let me send you the contact information for the staffer that staffs the Office of County Councils. Just make sure you CC her all with respondents.
Okay.
Kristen Cummings.
Thanks, Keith. These meetings are always, everybody's got a bunch of ideas. and
Really good
gotta-
talking points, though,
Somebody's got to do
Yeah.
some serious work, which
the writing of the.
appreciate that.
Yeah, running a pitch. I will come up with a draft and I will need everybody's help. Let me put it that way.
Absolutely.
Okay. The second part of the meeting was more about the study.
Hello, guys. It looks like you double booked us, because we're supposed to have this meeting.
Bye. I just want to come and be nosy.
What's next, Keith?
So, yes, I know, we got 30 minutes. How do we want to handle the report? The draft, we finally got a draft of the report. Do we want to just kind of put it up and share it real quick? We're gonna have to edit that too. But I think we just need to kind of get their eyes on it. We'll share this with everybody and then we'll share this with everybody, let everybody make comments on it.
Or do you want to go through it now or just share it?
We can do that. How's everybody doing on time?
I gotta leave in like 10 minutes.
Okay.
You should share it, but
I will
also.
share it.
Yeah.
We'll share it and then we'll just share the draft report that we got from the students. Let everybody take a look at it, make comments on it. And if you could just share that
Circulate it.
back to me. Okay? And then I'll incorporate.
Is the anticipation we would be sharing this report with the council?
This is,
It's attached.
this is attached to what we're putting in. So that's why I need to take a look at what they put together and then, yes, this would be attached to that letter. So that we have the report to share.
I think they did a good job. They're comprehensive with what the instructions, that they were given. I will say, you may want to polish the writing a little
Yes.
bit. I think there was a decent amount of ChatGPT
Yeah.
utilized.
Matter of fact, didn't they leave
Very,
the problem in it?
Welcome to the world of today's academia and student.
I'm very familiar.
Okay. So, yeah, well,
Well put, well
I
put.
see it now.
yeah, now we gotta see it. So, but we'll share that with everybody. I'm gonna really appreciate, as we wrap up here, I'm gonna really appreciate everybody's quick look at everything, because we are on a tight timeline. I've got to get this into the council. So, you know, I'll be putting together and sending drafts, and if we can get just quick eyes on it and input, it'll be perfect. And I don't have anything else. Anybody else?
Nope.
Open? Nothing?
Nope.
Darren, you're on mute.
Yes, I have something. Bilal, before the public hearing, I heard you getting sort of grilled by council about some housing issues, and you did a phenomenal
Oh,
job.
good for you.
Oh,
And
thank you.
I was gonna email you, and then I thought, no, I'll just tell him at this committee
Oh,
meeting.
John,
So
so
I
much.
was
Appreciate
very
it.
impressed.
Oh, now I
awesome.
gotta go back and tune in. I had it on.
I thought it was very confusing, but I was like, okay, if it works.
Well, you illustrated that you knew what you were talking about, whether or not everybody that you were talking to knew what you were talking about. You clearly demonstrated that you knew what you were talking about. So that was
Well,
very
thank
good.
you. I appreciate it. Glad we got that through, so. that was fun.
Great. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time today. We'll talk soon.
You guys are ready to get it on their calendars to. Okay.
25th, I'll send that out. I did say that.
I just put it on mine, but
Yeah.
I don't know.